Hey there, where you going? No, man, you got the right classroom. Come on in, take a seat beside me, my friend. Look, here comes T.A. Charlie.
I'm TA Charlie, and you're watching The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble, you search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean that you got to set up an account, but it's fast and easy and it's free. I did it. You can do it. For those slower members of class, you can also catch us on Facebook, on Twitch, and Twitter. And okay, sometimes on YouTube too, when Professor's not going to get himself censored. Mostly that's just Wednesdays. Then you can catch the podcast after the show. Professor will upload it to Podbean and to iHeart and Spotify. Just look for The Road to Concord. And you can go to the blog page. That's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you find all your show notes and study notes and all your handouts for the class. And you can call us 229-469-0335. Most of the times I've got the phone working. And finally, you can email the professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow right now, but he will eventually get around to emailing you back.
Yeah, we all know T.A. Charlie isn't all there. Now just stay seated and give the class a chance. Let's see what Professor Joe has on the lesson plan for today.
Good morning. Today's March 24th. It's Friday. Founders Friday, Fallacy Friday. I was going to do nothing but logic today, but Jimmy changed my mind yesterday in his phone call. We're going to take a look at the Declaration of Independence all over again. I'll get started with that here in just a moment. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I do have several emails from listeners I need to get to. I will do everything I can to get to them today or tomorrow, tomorrow evening. I'll do my best. No promises, but I'm going to try and force time into that. Over the next few days, we are in what? Hades week for me. Between now and next week, Hades week. Friday, a week from today, I won't be able to do a show. I've got to go to Jacksonville and pick up our youngest son. He's moving back to Panama City area, so I'll be on the road. I will not be able to do a show that day. I will look into seeing whether or not I can figure out how to do an automated replay. I'll let you know next week if we can pull that off. So that ought to handle the housekeeping for today. All right. Declaration of Independence. I'm going to start with something that if you saw yesterday's show when we were talking about George Bernard Shaw, I told you that sometimes he's right about things. So I'm going to start today's show with a quote by George Bernard Shaw. People who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. You know, this is the don't tell the cartoon character they can't fly when they're busy flying. His words were correct. George Bernard Shaw's, they're correct. However, as I pointed out on yesterday's show, George Bernard Shaw did not live according to his own assertions, very seldomly. Case in point, when he came over here and he told the United States to throw out our Constitution because it got in the way of tyranny, he didn't say that. He said it got in the way of the president just being able to do whatever he wanted to do. Form and function defined. So what he was saying is it gets in the way of tyranny. He was just trying to put on his little mask to make it sound better. Well, what he was trying to do was interrupt the men who had actually wrote and put the Constitution in place to prevent just that. So he was trying to interrupt people who were actually preventing tyranny. In Shaw's defense, he thought tyranny would help prevent tyranny, because he and FDR were good guys. They knew it was best for you. You shouldn't let these dead men who put the Constitution in place to keep them from being able to do what's best for you. You shouldn't let those guys get in the way. So in other words, in essence, Mr. Shaw was interrupting the men who are doing exactly this. And we got a little picture here for you. This is a lithograph or a hand drawing. It's the Declaration Committee. A lot of people today, we think, Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. Well, yeah, he did, but there was a committee that was assigned to draft it. There were 5 men. Sometimes we see pictures of only 3. We forget this. There's the 5. again in a color photograph, this time color painting. This is the one most of us end up seeing all the time. Just Ben Franklin, John Adams, and Jefferson standing up. Notice, this is a young Thomas Jefferson. I think he was what, 30 at the most, or 30, 31, or maybe younger. I think we'll find out here in a minute. If I remember correctly from last night, the slide I did will tell us. Excuse me. So, the Declaration of Independence. Class time. Let's get on it. This is a draft copy, is what we're going to be looking at today. On June 11th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress entrusted a committee of 5 delegates, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert R. Livingston, and Roger Sherman. Roger Sherman's an important individual. We'll look into him in future classes. With composing the Declaration of Independence, the committee chose 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson. Okay, so he's 33. To draft what he called an expression of the American mind. Let's stop there for a moment. I've told y'all before. The Declaration of Independence is the what and the why of America. It is the soul, the beating heart of this nation. It's the principle, the idea, the compass. The Constitution is just the how. If you want to put it in biblical terms, the Old Testament is the Declaration of Independence. The New Testament is just the Constitution. Yeah. We'll have to tie into that on a Worship Wednesday, but it's true. In conceptual relation terms, it's true. So we continue reading. Though he, Jefferson, turned to neither book or pamphlet, Jefferson relied on his knowledge of philosophy as well as the sentiments of the Virginia Constitution, the Declaration of Rights, and Richard Henry Lee's resolution proposed to Congress on June 7th. Jefferson later recalled, I drew it, but before I reported it to the committee, I communicated it separately to Dr. Franklin and Mr. Adams, requesting their corrections. The revised copy was submitted to Congress on June 28, 1776. That's what that picture is. That's where they're revising it before it was presented to the committee. This is where they're deciding that Jefferson's going to write it. The extant or existing documents. There are 6 extant, meaning existing drafts. Only one copy is referred to as the original rough draft, with copy edits from Franklin, Adams, and Congress. It is located in the Jefferson Papers at the Library of Congress. 4 additional drafts were sent by Jefferson to colleagues and do not contain the edits by Congress. Later, Jefferson also made his own notes on the Declaration debates and included them in the autobiography in 1821. There's a picture of the one that's in the congressional records right now. That's the original draft with all the edit notes in them. Kind of messy. This is the one they voted on. We're going to be looking at it today in depth. So Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence. We're going to be reading this. It's going to take us a little time. We're going to go through it, and then we're going to go through it a second time in a different way. And I'll show you why in a little bit. A declaration of the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress Assembly. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for a people to advance from the subordination in which they have hitherto remained, and to assume among the powers of the earth the equal and independent station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impelled them to the change. The note right there says TJ, Thomas Jefferson first wrote of, and then changed it to by. At this point, we're going to stop our look at the Declaration. And we're going to go to something. I originally was going to do this later in the draft. I got to drop this for a minute and bring it back up. I'm sliding through the PowerPoint presentation that I normally show you. I'm going to do it out of order today because it just struck me. This is the perfect time to do this. The pursuit of happiness in historical context. Well, not just the pursuit of happiness. You'll understand in a minute. This is author Conklin, Carly Nicole, Department of History, University of Virginia. Advisors McCurdy, Charles W. Corcoran, Department of History, University of Virginia. And the abstract is, this dissertation explores the meaning of the phrase, the pursuit of happiness in its historical context. The reason I'm doing this out of order, you'll see in a moment. The The pursuit of happiness goes directly to the laws of nature and nature's God. They're interconnected ideas. I've gotten this off of, if you look this up, you'll find it. It's online archive of the University of Virginia Scholarship. This is just a brief abstract of a doctoral, a doctorate level teaching on the concepts here, on this issue with the Constitution. Where we're going to be drawing from is Sir William Blackstone. That's his picture off there to the right. He's an English jurist, lawyer. He's born July 10th, 1723, in London, England. Died February 14th, 1780, Wallingford, Oxfordshire. He's an English jurist whose Commentaries on the Law of England, 4 volumes, written from 1765 to 1769, is the best-known description of the doctrine of English law. The work became the basis of university legal education in England and in North America. He was knighted in 1770. Blackstone was a good judge, but a better commentator. The Commentaries is a systematic, clear, and elegant description of the state of English law in the middle of 1830s in the 18th century. It had an immediate and outstanding success. In England and America, the Commentaries became the basis of university legal education. In other words, he wrote the what, where, how, when, and why of our legal system. Here's why this is important. This is from the Virginia University's dissertation. This is from the abstract. It says, in William Blackstone's Commentaries on the Law of England, the pursuit of happiness is defined as a method by which man could know the law of nature as it applied to humans. To know if a positive law was in conformity with the law of nature, man only had to ask himself if the positive law led to his own real and substantial happiness. Thus, Blackstone focused on the happiness portion of the phrase. Blackstone sought to replace Roman models of legal education and jurisprudence with the English models at the university level, and the pursuit of happiness was instrumental to his goals. He believed the pursuit of happiness to be a simple and certain method of jurisprudence by which English university students, future lawmakers and judges, could identify legal first principles and then apply those first principles in their efforts to perfect and preserve the English common law. So he's looking for a way to preserve the law, and he's using the university system to do it. Gee, where have we seen this pattern before? But again, it's not the pattern of what you're using. It's not the fact that you're going through the university system. It's how you do it and why. So this continues. It says, in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness is listed as an unalienable right bestowed by the Creator upon all men, who are created equal. Men like Thomas Jefferson, who drafted the Declaration, focused on the pursuit portion of the phrase. Now notice, Blackstone was focusing on happiness. Jefferson's focusing on the pursuit. They understood the pursuit of happiness as man's unalienable right to choose to live in harmony with the law of nature as it pertained to humans. When man was ruled by tyranny, such choices were impossible. This understanding of pursuit of happiness reflects a founding era philosophy of the first principles that existed at the convergence of English law and legal theory, classical history and philosophy, Christianity, and the Scottish Enlightenment's focus on Newtonian science. Now, we've had past classes where it said that all this was about was focus on the scientific. You remember Wilson? The founders just wanted to look at the Newtonian science version of things. No. Wilson was looking for an excuse to make himself like George Bernard Shaw. I'm going to look scholarly and educated on this when I'm really just feeding the people baffled bull so they'll buy my poison and let me be dictator. Yeah, I'm making fun of Wilson, but you know what? That's exactly what he was doing. You can paint the happy George Bernard face on it all you want. He's just a happy dictator, what he wanted you to think. Kind, benevolent, happy day. That's all he wanted to be, though, was a dictator. And that was a time when dictator was not a bad word. So what these people from a university system, no doubt, no less, in Virginia, blue state, is telling you that no, actually, this was a convergence of things. It was a convergence of English law and legal theory, classical history and philosophy, Christianity, and the Scottish Enlightenment's focus on Newtonian science. All of those come together. Checkmate, Mr. Wilson. You were either ignorant or you lied. And seeing as how you were a university professor, the prudent thing to do here is to say Mr. Wilson lied. So this continues. Both Blackstone and Jefferson defined happiness as eudaimonia or eudaimonia, the ancient Greek concept of human flourishing or well-being. Similarly, both Blackstone and Jefferson understood that to pursue happiness was to choose to live in harmony with the law of nature as it applied to humans and thereby to flourish. It was in this sense that the phrase was understood in the 18th century historical context. Here's a few little quotes. This is directly from Blackstone's commentaries. This is from the one written in 1765. It says, when the Supreme Being formed the universe and created matter out of nothing, stop right there. In all of mankind, there is one God, creator God, who created the universe ex nihilo, out of nothing. That is Yahweh, the God of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Blackstone is talking about the God of the Bible, because that's the only one known to man who made the universe out of nothing. So Blackstone says, and created matter out of nothing, he impressed certain principles upon that matter. When he put that matter into motion, he established certain laws of motion. If we farther advance to vegetable and animal life, we shall find them still governed by laws. The operations of inanimate and organic processes are not left to chance or the will of the creature itself, but are performed in a wondrous involuntary manner and guided by the unerring rules laid down by the Creator. Man, considered as a creature, must necessarily be subject to the laws of his Creator, for he is an entirely dependent being, and consequently, as man depends absolutely upon his Maker for everything, it is necessary that he should in all points conform to the Maker's will. This will of his Maker is called the law of nature. So when the university professors we were just reading wrote their abstract, they, whether consciously or subconsciously, separated the connection between law of nature and the God of the Bible. Because notice, they didn't mention any of this. Blackstone does. This is what happens with university professors who have their own agenda or bias and do not work to separate their agenda and bias from the product that they're producing for their students. It was the best thing I could find for this class, and it still shows a bias toward anti-biblical foundings. But it gets better. Let's just keep going. We're still reading Blackstone. The doctrines thus delivered we call the revealed or divine law, and they are to be found only in the Holy Scriptures. He's talking about the Bible. These precepts are found upon comparison to be really a part of the original law of nature. As then the moral precepts of this law are indeed of the same original with those of the law of nature. The revealed law is the law of nature expressly declared to be so by God himself. Upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, depend all human laws. The law of nature and the law of God. He's talking about Yahweh. He's saying all human laws must point back to Yahweh and the Bible and the laws of nature, or they're not in accordance with the Creator's will, therefore not law. This is the pursuit of happiness, being able to choose to live in accordance with this understanding. This is the man who wrote the commentaries that upon which our legal system was originally built. It has since been perverted. He says, this is Samuel Adams. Just to remind you, the founding fathers, after the Declaration was written, this is, I think, from August 1st, in a speech about the Declaration, Samuel Adams says, this day, I trust the reign of political Protestantism will commence. We have explored the temple of royalty and found that the idol we have bowed down to has eyes which see not, ears that hear not, or prayers, and a heart like the nether millstone. We have this day restored the sovereign to whom all men ought to be obedient. He reigns in heaven, and with a propitious eye beholds his subjects, assuming that freedom of thought and dignity of self-direction which he bestowed upon them. For the rising to the setting sun may his kingdom come. Sam Adams thought what we were doing was creating a republic that would live in accordance with that idea and expression right there. The Bible, not man's will. And John Adams writes, The general principles upon which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. He's talking about the God of the Bible. We have no government armed with a power capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion, avarice, ambition, reverence, and revenge or gallantry would break the strongest cords of the Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And then John Adams says the revolution was effected before the war commenced. The revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people, a change in their religious sentiments of their duties and obligations. This radical change in the principles, opinions, sentiments, and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. And in this case, he's talking about the reference to the Great Awakening and the role it played in the formation of the United States. Why is it so difficult for our supposed great, scholars and leaders who know everything? I got the PhD and all the letters after my name. So why do you not understand what the pursuit of happiness is? It's right there. It's been explained to us. We know exactly what it means. Even the modern university professors in Virginia figured out, they just separated Yahweh from it. Blackstone doesn't do that. So why did the professors who wrote that abstract for the University of Virginia point to Blackstone, but then separate what Blackstone says the law of nature is? He said the law of nature is inseparable from the revealed law. In other words, the Bible is the law of nature. Law of nature is part of the revealed law of the Bible. They're one and the same. Where's the Bible say that, Joe? Romans 1 and 2. Exactly where John Locke said he got his first and second treatise on government. John Locke, like the second most cited source by the founding fathers in the drafting of the Declaration and the Constitution. Second, who's the first? Bible. What? Yeah. If you take the Bible and Locke and maybe Blackstone, you have well over half of the citations between the founders back and forth. You have over half of the citations for their thinking. Right there. And people will tell you that the scriptures Christianity played no part in the founding of this nation. Wrong. Demonstrably wrong, meaning I can prove it as a fact. So folks, if you want to restore individual rights and liberty, if you want to quote unquote save America, you will not be able to do so without returning to your Bible, period, end of story, full stop, drop the mic, strut off the stage. You will not. Not my opinion, John Adams' opinion. Even Jefferson. Now, people will tell you Jefferson didn't know what he was quoting, when he wrote all those things. He knew. He knew full well he was referencing Blackstone. Jefferson was a lawyer. He wasn't stupid. So we go back to our slide. This is where we stopped. Now we continue in the next part. I've had to split this second paragraph up. It was too big for the slideshow. It says, we hold these truths to be sacred. This is the original draft, okay? This is not what got published. Sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal and independent, that from that equal creation they derive right, inherent, and inalienable, among which are the preservations of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these ends, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government shall become destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect the safety and happiness. And then there's some notes down there about what was changed. If you want to read these, you can go back later in the show and you can start and stop. But when we get through this, I'll show you I've already done this for you on a blog page, and I'll show you the blog post. It'll make what we're doing right now a little more visually understandable. This is the rest of this paragraph. It says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the form to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations begun at a distinguished period and pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to subject them to arbitrary power, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. What he's saying there is if I can show you a point in time where somebody starts using the government to attack me and to make me a slave, I've got a right to throw them off. It continues, such has been the patient suffrage of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to expunge their former systems of government. The history of His present Majesty, meaning King George, is a history of unremittent injuries and usurpations, among which no one fact stands single or solitary to contradict the uniform tenor of the rest, all of which have in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world, for the truth of which we pledge a faith yet unsullied by falsehood. Okay, what you've had to this point, Jefferson just wrote a legal complaint. And now he's about to provide evidence for his legal complaint. He wrote this draft in the form of an international legal complaint of the time. When the rest of the delegation gets a hold of this draft, they change it. It's no longer a legal complaint amongst nations. It becomes a legal complaint to the creator of the universe. We'll see that when I present this draft again in a moment, after we get done reading it. I'll bring it up to you again later. I'll show it to you in a different way, and it'll make a lot more sense. The younger Jefferson, in all his youthful, zeal, he wrote a good document. The older men in the delegation tweaked it a bit, and this is one case where I'm glad they did. So we're going to continue here. He's presenting his evidence now. This is the evidence that Jefferson says proves the case of his complaint. Everything here where it says he, this is the king. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has neglected utterly to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants alone. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly and continually for opposing with many firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. And folks, this is what I say. You got to learn how to read the older English writing. We'll go through this in a little bit. It'll get clearer, but just this is what Jefferson originally wrote. Pay attention because we've changed it. And in most cases for the better, but some cases the older gentleman changed the original draft in favor of manna over principle, and we're still paying for it today. Next complaint. He has refused for a long space of time to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. Okay, what he's talking about there needs to be explained. Basically, he's saying that the King George has laid down the administrative duties, the executive and administrative duties, to the point where it's returned to the law of nature. And it's costing people. The government's not working properly in the colonies because of the king. And he's returned us to the law of nature and put us basically at war, in a state of the colonies in this condition of war with each other, with the natives, and with the king. The next point, he says, he has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migration hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. In other words, he's restricting the growth of the colonies. He has suffered the administration of justice totally to cease in some of these colonies, refusing his assent to laws for establishing judicial powers. In other words, he's not allowing the government to function. He has made our judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and amount of their salaries, which basically undermines the judge. He has erected a multitude of new offices by his self-assumed power, and sent hitherto swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. In other words, he set up a bureaucracy of his own will. The king just set up a bureaucracy, kind of like when our presidents just create, our Congress creates bureaucracies, and the executive term, the presidency, just grows them in whatever way they want. He, the king, has kept among us in times of peace standing armies and ships of war, meaning you're under military occupation. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. In other words, he's martial law. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdiction foreign to our constitutions and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their pretent acts of legislation for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. In other words, he's let Parliament intercede in the governing of the colonies where the charters did not allow that. In other words, the king's acting lawlessly. For protecting them by mock trial for punishment for any murders they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. In other words, that the king was not holding his soldiers accountable for their actions. For cutting off trade with all parts of the world. He was putting the colonies under embargo. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, no representation. For depriving us of the benefits of trial by jury. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. In other words, shanghaiing you and taking you overseas to be tried outside of your home country. For taking away our charters and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. That's unconstitutional. That's just dissolving their charter, their constitution, and acting them as just a free despot. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with powers to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. In other words, they dissolved the colonial government and said that he, the king, could dictate. He has abducted government here, or abdicated government here, withdrawing his governors and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection. In other words, he's not protecting the colonies like he's supposed to, like the charter said he was. In other words, today, he's allowing the borders to be overrun. He's allowing state attorneys general to just allow criminals out of jail willy-nilly when the law says they're not supposed to do that, meaning that those states no longer have a representative government, which is a constitutional guarantee, which does say the president can now step in. So King George isn't doing these things. He, King George, has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, dissolution, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy unworthy to the head of civilized nation. He has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions of existence. By the way, today we say the American Indian was just a peaceful little kumbaya type. Not so much. Here's a historical reference of that. He has incited treasonable insurrections in our fellow subjects with the allurements of forfeiture and confiscation of our property. And he has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of liberty, of life and liberty, in the persons of distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in other hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thitherto. He's talking about slavery here. He's condemning the king for going to other parts of the world, seizing people, bringing them to the colonies, and selling them into slavery. Yeah, Mr. Jefferson, the one who wanted to defend slavery, he's attacking it here in the Declaration. And he's calling the king cruel war against human nature itself. So he says, this piratical warfare, the opprobrium of the infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain. Determined to keep open a market when men should be bought and sold, he has prostituted the negative for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or restrain this execrable commerce. In other words, the colonies have been trying to stop it. The king won't let them. And that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of disguise to die, or distinguished to die, he is now exciting those very people to rise in arms amongst us, and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, by murdering the people upon whom he also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of the others. In other words, import a whole bunch of slaves against the colony's will, then start attacking the colonies, giving the slaves a reason to revolt and just cause general chaos. Like Antifa and BLM in the streets. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of people who mean to be free. Future ages will scarce believe that the hardiness of one man, adventured with the short compass of 12 years only on so many acts of tyranny without a mask over a people fostered and fixed in principles of liberty. Then he goes on. We're nearing the end. It says, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend a jurisdiction over these our states. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here, no one of which could warrant so strange a pretension, that these were effected at the expense of our own blood and treasure, unassisted by the wealth and the strength of Great Britain. In other words, he's saying, hey, we've warned you over and over again, Britain, that you're violating our charters and that we built these colonies, not you. We've done this with our own sweat and blood and our own lives, not you. He says that in constituting indeed our several forms of government, we had adopted one common king, thereby laying a foundation of perpetual league and amity with them. In other words, hey, even though we did all this, we're allowing the king, we accepted the king. We're not your enemy. He says, but that submission to their parliament was no part of our constitution, nor ever an idea, if history may be credited. In other words, it's us and the king. Parliament's got no part of this. You got to know what's going on in history here. Parliament's trying to usurp the colonies and weasel their way into this where they didn't belong. It's kind of like what our government's doing now. And we appeal to their native justice and magnanimity, as well as to the ties of common kindred, to disavow these usurpations, which were likely to interrupt our correspondence and connection. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity, and when occasion have been given them by the regular course of their laws of removing from their councils the distributors of our harmony, they have by their free election reestablished them in power. Blah 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 blah. For they're usurping their authority is they're overstepping their authority. They're doing things they're not permitted to do. They're acting outside of the charters. They're being tyrants. They're trying to take over the colonies. And at this very time, too, they are permitting their chief magistrate to send over not only soldiers of our common blood, but Scotch and foreign mercenaries to invade and deluge us in blood. In other words, when your own government brings mercenaries in, they're waging war against you. Well, they're not doing that here in the United States, Joe. No, but by giving the UN through the WHO control over our government, yes, they are. Yes, they are. It says these facts have given the last stab to agonizing affection, and many spirit binds us to renounce forever these unfeeling brethren. In other words, we got to separate. So he says we must endeavor to forget our former love for them and former love for Britain, and to uphold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We might have been free and great people together, but a communication of grandeur and of freedom, it seems, is below their dignity. Be it so, since they will have it. The road to glory and happiness is open to us. We will climb it in a separate state and acquire in these necessity which pronounce our everlasting adieu. You'll see that all of that is not in the declaration we ratified. Now, if you are, that's where he ended the declaration. That's not the one we know, and for good reason. And thank Yahweh that it happened this way. But if you're in an area, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, and we are on YouTube today, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter, you'll notice that I threw up a couple of links at the start of the show. And it's links to previous blog posts that I've written about this very subject. And if you're on Rumble, it's in the description of the show today. But what I want to do is I want to hop over to, let's do it this way, share the screen with you. This is the first one I want to show you. This is the blog post that I wrote. Oh gosh, I don't even remember the dates at the bottom. It says a new look at the original Declaration of Independence. It'll be hard for you to read this because it's a little smaller on your screen. But the link's there. You can go to the Road to Concord. You can find this. But what I did here is I changed the colors. And in the Jefferson's original words are in blue. And where they were altered, where they were amended, that's going to be in green. And where his words were deleted, that's going to be in red. And look how much red we have in this. So when it starts here, he changed by the creator with inherent and inalienable rights. They changed it to certain rights. Now, if you grab your Webster's Dictionary of 1828, I think, or 1826, certain means for sure. I have full faith and trust in these rights. I have concrete knowledge that they're inalienable. That's not how we read it now. Today we read it as you have specific rights. That's not what they meant. Notice what he said with inherent and inalienable. Inherent means it's part and parcel to your being. It cannot be separated from you. The men who were in the full delegation of the declaration, the body that all signed the final draft, they changed it to certain. Basically meaning you can count on them and take them to the bank. We've changed that now to they're not so sure. They're just certain rights, specific rights here and there, and we can weasel around that. That's the fallacy of equivocation. So we have altered the Declaration of Independence by equivocating that word. That's a form of tyranny or lawlessness upon the Declaration. Notice that they got rid of begun at distinguished period. They struck that. And they struck expunged and put in altered their form of systems of government because the king hadn't technically expunged it. And this is why in this blog post I argue that Jefferson's his zeal was a little too much. And the older gentlemen had to rein him in their combined wisdom. And then he says unremitting, that's constantly doing it. Well, they put in repeated. The green words here are more accurately describing what was going on. So they focused Jefferson's original draft a little more. And for good reason. They did right here, in my opinion. They said, among which appears no solitary fact to contradict the uniform tenor of the rest by all. They struck that. And it says, all having indirect object. In other words, all the usurpations all had the direct object of establishment of absolute tyranny. And then they struck, for the truth of which we pledge a faith yet unsullified by falsehood. They just, zealous, youthful words, they struck it. Down here where he says he dissolved representative houses repeatedly and continually, that's because he didn't do it constantly. He only did it in a response to things the colonies were doing. So they just struck that word. Down here, he has suffered. He has obstructed the administration of justice, not put up with it. In other words, they made that one a little tighter, a little more offensive to the king. And then they struck totally cease in some of these states. And that's because some of the states' governments were still functioning, just not the way they should. And he says he has made our judges dependent on his will alone. They struck that. And when they did that, they accused the king of making English judges, corrupting English judges as well. He says he has erected a multitude of new offenses by a self-assumed power. They struck that. They just said he has erected a multitude of new offenses and sent hither swarms of new officers. They also struck ships of war. Come down here. For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. The way Jefferson originally wrote it, the king had deprived the colonists of trial by jury in all cases. So the Greater Council added language there. And down here it says, a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these states. Well, this was before we were actually states, because state implies sovereignty. So at this point, they had not signed the declaration, so they were still colonies. So the complaint needed to say colonies. So once again, wiser heads prevailed here in the drafting of this document. And it says he has abdicated government here, withdrawing his governors and declaring us out of his allegiance and protection. So they struck that. They said he's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection in waging war against us. This is a case where the complaint against the king is very clear. In other words, he has abdicated his authority, his duty to protect the colonies, and started to wage war against them. In the second hour, we're going to go back and look at this in different ways. What are we doing today that might be similar to the complaints back then? That might bring the Declaration of Independence, renew it, bring it back anew once again in our current times. In this next one here, they've added, this is dissolution and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. In other words, they strengthened the language there. And then again, he has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indians. So extended domestic insurrection, that's helping Antifa and BLM while coming down on a peaceful protest on January 6th and declaring it to be an insurrection. They're actually trying to stir up an insurrection, which would then give the King George the excuse to bring his troops in and put all of it down, colonies included. The pattern of King George is present right now in our current government. Then we will see that they struck all of this, all of the parts about slavery. And that was because they needed to keep a couple of the southern states in line with them so that they'd be united. This here is older men choosing money over the principled ideals of the youth. This is a case where they should have stuck with Jefferson. We're still paying the price for them striking this out. They could have tweaked it, but we're paying the price for that. And then it says, a prince whose charter is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be ruler of, and they inserted free people. In other words, he's fit to be ruler of a bunch of slaves. But then they struck, who mean to be free. Future ages will scarcely be. They struck all that zealous language. And they struck a lot right here, too. We're not going to go over all of that, but they basically rewrote that whole huge paragraph. You see, red was struck, green was added. And now here's the last paragraph. This is important. This is very important. People who will tell you that the founding fathers were not looking to be religious in the forming of this country. We've read what Jefferson originally wrote. Let's now read what the whole body added. It says, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, now they're calling themselves states, because now they're about to declare themselves free, appeal to the judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. We are no longer making this an international document between men and nations. We're now appealing to the creator of the universe. We're in natural law world right now. We're in Blackstone's commentaries. They added that. Do in the name and by authority of the good people of these states. They put in colonies. Reject and renounce, blah, 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 blah. Did away with all of Jefferson's language there. Said solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are dissolved from allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Jump down to the last line. Jefferson didn't write this. They put it back in there. It says, as for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. In other words, we're relying on God for our case to plead. We're pleading our case to him when we rely on him to judge it. We mutually pledge to each other our lives and our fortunes and our sacred honor. So if you're telling me that the men who drafted our Constitution and our Declaration were not consciously appealing to God, why did they add that over top of Jefferson's writing as the whole body? Do you see a logical inconsistency there? Because I do. But if you're reading modern historians, you won't even know about this because they won't show you the two different drafts side by side to show you the changes that were made. Back to our slideshow. This is a very good book. If you're seeing the chalkboard, you see me out there in the little window. I've got it. This is Defending the Declaration, How the Bible and Christianity Influenced the Writing of the Declaration of Independence. It's by Gary T. Amos. We're going to start soon with the American Covenant, roll into this book, and then roll into the defending the Christianity of the Constitution, or the Christian influence on the Constitution. When the show goes into its new studio, we're going to do at least 1 hour every Friday until we get through all of this. We're going to start tracing the road to Concord. to Lexington Green, to the shot heard around the world. And that path goes back through thousands of years, thousands plus years, almost 2,000 years now. Actually, it goes back about 3,500 years now, actually, to be honest, to Moses, or Moshe in the Hebrew. And we'll do some of that, but we're gonna start probably with the Magna Carta and the Mayflower Compact and come forward, and we're going to trace the history of the founding of this nation, both in human historic terms and in biblical and covenant terms, prophetic terms. And I'm going to show you how they go hand in hand. They're tied together. And then we've already done this. So we went through Blackstone. All right, that was the slideshow presentation I had for you today. I'll bump that out of there. The whole purpose of looking at the Declaration of Independence. Talk to you for a few minutes before we go to our break. When we come back, we're going to look at a couple of other blog posts that I have written. But the purpose for this show, like it was at Jimmy's suggestion yesterday, or he prompted it anyway. The Declaration of Independence was written for a reason. The colonists had been decades trying to stop the king's attacks on the colonies. Well, why was the king attacking the colonies? Because they were becoming more powerful than England. They were growing in size, population-wise, and England was becoming dependent on the raw materials coming out of the colonies. And England was worried that the colonies would soon start influencing English policy. In other words, they would start ruling England, Great Britain. So they wanted to start putting the colonies down, putting them under a heel, under their boot, so that they could keep control over their empire's possessions, their colonies. They wanted to keep their kingdom, their empire together. So they started attacking the colonies legally and by actual acts of war with their soldiers, using their military might. Now, if you're a biblical scholar and you understand that I'm not saying for sure, hear me clearly, but if you understand that there's good reason to believe that England was the consolidation of the seat of Israel as a nation, as a people in the diaspora. And why do I say that? Well, the English coat of arms is very biblical in nature. But if you knew that, you'd be very careful about stomping on the colonies, especially through taxes like they did, because that's how Israel originally lost the northern kingdom, through stupid tax policy. And it was led by the militarily strongest of the northern tribes, Ephraim. And we repeated that policy, that practice here in the United States. We repeated that screw up between England and the United States. We separated this. Oh, the parallels here. The very first Worship Wednesday, the prophecies of Ephraim. We've got to revisit that. The parallels are just undeniable. And then with the War of Northern Aggression, once again, not over tax policy per se this time, but still, one house wanting to dominate another. That's Ephraim and Manasseh wanting to separate out of each other. It's all sorts of stupidity, but it's biblical parallels. There's prophetic history here in this country. And if you know the signs, if you know the symbology, if you know the symbols, if you know the prophecies, if you know our history, our true history, I can then show you apples to apples, from biblical prophecy to what we would think of as secular history, although it's not secular. It's history. It's biblical history. We just don't see it that way anymore. The founding fathers did. They called this New Israel. They didn't mean nation of Israel. And they didn't mean substitute theology where we were spiritual Israel. They meant we were the land promised to Ephraim in prophecy. Ephraim is called the leader of Israel. Israel is the northern tribes, the divorced bride. This is all, I know, Bible language here. Joe, you got me in the pew again. Pay attention. Because this is why we're having trouble in this country. We are in violation of the compact that we made in the Mayflower, and then in Pennsylvania, and then with President Washington in the first inauguration of president under the second Constitution, under the Constitution, not the Articles of Confederation. We're in violation of those compacts. If you violate a compact with Yahweh, he will come and demand the payment for that. You'll get the curse. You'll get the judgment. That's why this country's in trouble. Now, that's the spiritual reason for it. You can look at the seculars, but that's the problem. The secular problems that you'll identify, those are because we're spiritually wrong. We're out of whack with the covenant. When I start, hopefully in April, when we start showing these side by side by side, hopefully they'll become as apparent to you as they are to me. And you'll understand what John Adams and Samuel Adams were trying to tell us, and all the founders that I've shown with you, where they keep telling you the Christian religion is the only way you're going to hold on to your liberty. You'll start understanding why I hammer on that. And remember, I've told you before, I started out believing the history books until I started reading the founders. And then I realized my historian professors and authors, either through ignorance or through deliberate malice, lied to me. The founding fathers are not lying. We're going to bring it to you. We're going to start when the new studio is up. We've been getting, and by we, I've got people helping me, but this is all voluntary organization here, folks. And they talk to me in the background, Charlie, and then you all met Sharky. We plan this. We work on this together. Me mostly, but they're going to become bigger and bigger part of this. We want to help you wake up and see what's going on in the world. And maybe for those who are willing to listen, bring your Bible to life. And for those of you who have never believed in it, maybe give you a reason to accept it, a reason that you've never heard before, or to explain it in ways that you finally can go, oh, okay, wait a minute. Now I get it. It's important. It is important. It's eternally important. But it's also important to the here and now, in the physical world. The founding fathers knew this. Now, you'll hear people tell you Jefferson didn't have anything to do with God in the drafting of the Declaration. Okay, fine. I don't believe that, but okay, fine. The men who added those green words sure as heck did. And they added language that was very specific. But you also, to believe that he had nothing to do with it, you'd have to believe that Jefferson was entirely ignorant of Sir William Blackstone's commentaries. And he wrote just off of what happened in Virginia in the years leading up to the Declaration. Well, if you knew what was going on in Virginia, the language in the beginning of the Declaration of Independence is not new. It was written by another Virginian, almost word for word. Very, very similar, very close. And that Virginian drew it directly from Sir William Blackstone's commentaries. Not my opinion, the man who penned them for the Constitution of the state of Virginia. He said so. And Jefferson was well aware of it because he was involved in the drafting of that Constitution, and he knew the man who penned them. So to say that Jefferson did not know that appealing to the law of nature and nature's God was a Christian reference is an act of either colossal ignorance or deliberate deception. It's one of the two. It can't be both, and it can't be a third, because the facts don't support any other conclusion. And the evidence for us to learn from is still here with us today, mostly because Jefferson told everybody, collect everything we do as much as you can and preserve it for posterity, for the future generations, so that they'll know what we were doing or trying to do, how and why. And when they get screwed up and sideways, they'll be able to go back to us and fix it. Well, that's the whole point of this show. Go back to it, see what they were trying to do, why, how, and fix it. Well, you cannot do that without accepting the biblical background at the same time, because they told you can't. Now, it's Founders Friday. I'm in a little bit of a snarky mood. Break time. I'll give you a longer break today. Y'all know what's coming, or a lot of you should. Here you go.
Gentlemen, there is no longer any ground for hope. If we wish to be free, if we wish to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges which belong to us as free men, if we mean not basely to abandon the noble struggle in which we have been so long engaged, in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our struggle be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat it, sir. We must fight! And the King of Homes and to the God of hosts is all we have left us.
Arms, Mr. Henry! What arms? We are weak, sir!
They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so powerful an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week? Or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and a British Guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs, hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemy hath bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak if we make a proper use of those means the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country that which we possess, are invincible by any force our enemy can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sirs, we have no election. Should we be base enough to desire it, it is now already too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged, their clanking may be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come!
Mr. Henry, we speak for peace, sir!
It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that blows from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that they wish? What would they have? Is life so dear? Or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take. But as for me, give me liberty or give me death!
Two arms, Mr. Henry!
Remember, at the time he gave that speech, the king had sent troops to Boston, Massachusetts, and was literally attacking them, trying to destroy that colony. So when he says our brethren are already in the field, he meant it. The militia was in the field fighting the redcoats already. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this up here. Back to our screen. This is the second link that I gave you. If you go to the Road to Concord, this is the Declaration of Independence obsolete? Now, I'm not going to read this word for word, but I am going to go over certain sections of it with you. You can go back and find this later after class. This was written, let me go back down there and find out. I talked to a lawyer friend of mine. He was an assistant attorney general in Texas. And I wrote this back in June 17th of 2016. And this is back then in 2016, so this is 7 years ago. And I talked to my lawyer friend of mine, and he goes, holy crap, because I asked him, I said, help me write this. I said, let's just go through the Declaration, and let's see if we're doing anything today that's parallel to the complaints that in the Declaration that was actually signed and published. And he was surprised at how many things he could think of just off the top of his head without having to do any research whatsoever. This was in 2016. I start with this, and there's some highlighted sections here. I know it's not going to be easy to read on the board, but you can listen to me. And you go back and do this later if you want. You can read this later. And remember, 7 years ago, my thinking has evolved a little bit, but on the most part, not as much as what people might think. The biggest thing I would change on this, I'd get a little bit of the snarkiness out of it. You'll see that I'm kinder today than I was back then, or at least a little bit. But it says here, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. This is the founding document of this country. This is a legal document. The Constitution does not found this country. The Declaration of Independence does. This is a legal document. This is part of our government. This is the filter by which everything in the Constitution is supposed to be read and instituted. And the Constitution says so, because it says this 12th year of the United States of America, recognizing that the Declaration of Independence founded this nation. And then later on, John Quincy Adams, who was in service to this nation since the age of 9, I think it was 1824, 1826, it was a July 4th celebration, says in a speech that the founding law of this country was the Declaration of Independence, and to that date had not been disannulled. And it never was disannulled. The progressives under Woodrow Wilson just swept it away and said, no longer applies. And we let them. And you're going to understand why that's important. Wilson succeeded in doing what King George in Parliament tried to do and failed. And that's our fault. But on here it says, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separate. In other words, they're appealing to the God of the Bible. And then they're saying, yeah, but out of respect to individuals, because you're humans, because you're created in God's image, we have some duty to explain to you why we want to separate from you. Remember my show on secession? I used the model of Florida. I think I'm going to redo that show in a little more depth here. And I think I'm going to make sure Governor DeSantis, or I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure he gets to hear it. Because it might be time to get very serious about seceding from the mess we're in. And I mean now. You think the men who wrote this weren't serious? They pledged their life and liberty to each other, and their fortune and their sacred honor. And they held tight so that they wouldn't swing together. It's time for the states that still hear the beat of this document, who still have liberty and justice and individual, the ability to, who still yearn for the ability to follow the call of the Creator according to their conscience freely. It's time for them to do something very similar to what the Founding Fathers did before it's too late. And that time is fast running out. And I mean, we could be down to days. We haven't addressed this banking collapse thing. That's a false flag. There's nothing wrong with the banking. Not like what you're being told, anyway. And it could be fixed relatively quickly. The problem is they don't want to fix it. So we're going to have to address this soon. And he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, if you can't see that this is true, you're not part and parcel to them. You live in a different world than they do. That all men are created equal. They're not talking about we can all be Michael Jordans, or we're all Shaqs, or we're all Gretzky's. They're not talking about how we're all, Mariah Carey singer. No. You're created equal in the image of God. When you understand the background thinking of these men, that's really easy to see. You're equal in the image of God, sinner and saved alike, and that they were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness being the right to live according to your conscience, to pursue God's way of doing things as best you understand them. We've already covered that. That's what Sir William Blackstone teaches us. They knew what they were saying. And today, an honest person knows what they meant as well. Because the evidence is right there. I've given it to you today. You can search in vain. You will never find a founding father speaking against what I explained earlier in the first hour. You will find plenty of progressive historians and revisionists saying it, but you will not find a founding father saying it. So it goes down. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That tells you that the Constitution which follows and this declaration are social contracts. If you understand the principle of social contract, an agreement amongst men as to what the government is for and is going to do, what it can and cannot do, that's a social contract. If you understand that that's part and parcel of their times and the world they lived, they don't have to say, well, we're writing a social contract. It's the air they breathed. They just assumed you knew that. And that's another thing we got so much to cover. But they're saying that your government is only legitimate as long as the people support it. There is a good portion of this country, what we call red states, that no longer support being dictated to by a minority of states. Because this country literally is dictated to by 3 cities. New York City, and Chicago, and LA. You only need those 3 to win the election if you had a straight up, popular vote in the country. If we were pure democracy, which they're working for that reason, we've got 3 cities dictating to the whole country. The founding fathers would revolt against that for good reason. And even if you go by states, we have a handful of states dictating to the majority of states. Dictation violates our social contract. So today, the federal government is in violation of the social contract, which, according to the Declaration of Independence, says they're not a government. They're no longer the government. Then it says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends of the agreement of the social contract up here, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizations, its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. The progressives have not done this. We have not had an actual amendment since the institution of the progressive movement, since it finally laid hold of our country. We don't do that anymore. Now we just pass laws that amend the Constitution. Well, those laws are illegal. They're illegal. None of them should be upheld, but yet the courts uphold them. The courts are part of the cabal to usurp this country, to take it over, to subvert it. We are in dire need of righteous men and women to stand up and fight this. But you're not going to find them. You know why? Because you are not going to find anybody who will listen to a devout believer. The only people that are going to fight this are going to be devout believers. Why am I saying that? Because they won't care if you kill them. If they stand up for the teachings of the scriptures and insist that our country align with them and be governed by them, you either will not listen to them or you will kill them. And you don't have them anymore. The stars, the teachers, have been swept from the sky. So you're searching everywhere for men to save you. And that is why you keep failing. Men will not save us. The only thing that's going to save us is the same thing that saved the founding fathers. We've already read it. We appeal to the creator of this universe to judge and rule in our cause. I paraphrased it. But they looked to him, not to each other. They pledged each other to stand together in that endeavor. But as a united body, they appealed to him and flat out told you the pursuit of happiness is trying to live according to his teachings. Do we do that today? No. Did the founding fathers tell you that that wouldn't work if you don't do it? Yes, they told you it won't work. How many other people in the history of human events, in the history of all human events, where else do you find a country where the men who started a revolution ended it and started the government that replaced the one they got rid of? I've searched. I've found one example. One. So I have one example, the United States of America, and I ignore the instruction of those men and expect to be able to do it otherwise? Okay, whatever. Go down here, it says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. If we want to change the current government we have right now, is it a light and transient cause? No, because it's turned itself by self-decree from a federal government, a government of a federation of states, a government of the states. It's turned itself into a national government, thereby nationalizing the states, making them affect counties. The states are no longer individual nations. And we can thank Lincoln for this. And the federal government has just ever consolidated its power from that moment forward. In that sense, it is either we are no longer under the United States Constitution, in which case what we have now as a government is at war with us and we should go to war with it. And yes, I meant that literally. So go ahead and censor me out there, social media. If we're still under the Constitution, the government we have right now is illegitimate and needs to be replaced by the states. But if we're not under the Constitution, if we are now under a national government, then that government is illegitimate and we need to go to war with it to end it. The states need to declare war on it. Yes, declaration of war by the states. So in one case, you'd have to secede. If the Constitution is still in place, you would either need an Article 5 convention to fix this mess, or you need to secede from a total perversion of the Constitution. But that's understanding us as being sovereign states. Since Lincoln, the courts no longer recognize you that way. They recognize you as a county within the state of the United States. They turned us into one single nation. And from that, you got to wage war. You have to secede and rebel. But you got to do it legally. You have to do that under the shield of government. Founding fathers even said so. You got to do that we don't think that way anymore. But it's right there in the Declaration. The Declaration's our guide. Now look here. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. Do we have anything today that shows the federal government or even our state governments refusing to pass laws that the people want? So this is the equivalent of the president refusing to comply with U.S. immigration law. It's also equivalent to the president acting as though the laws that have been passed when they haven't. He acts as though a law has been passed when it hasn't. And in rewriting laws without any involvement by duly appointed and elected legislative bodies. We still have the same problem today. Biden's wanting to do away with the Second Amendment just by decree. The left has always wanted to do that. That's lawlessness. But we want laws passed to help. We want to limit term limits. We want to tort reform, things like this. You can't get that done. Same problem then today. We can't. The state of Florida, the northwest part of the state of Florida, we have voted repeatedly to end the daylight savings time. The federal government says we can't do that. Somebody please show me the enumerated powers where it says the federal government has any jurisdiction in that area. You won't find it. They'll make it up out of whole cloth by, progressive mental gymnastics, in which case they can turn a cow into a gold bar and then insist that they did it. But you won't find in the Constitution where it says they have that authority. And yet we need their consent. That's the same thing that the founders were complaining about. That the federal government, in this case King George, he's just totally messed up the actual function of government. It says he has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent. That right there is exactly, the state has passed the law. We've voted to do away with daylight savings time in the northwest part of Florida, and we'll all be on one time zone. But we can't do that until Washington gives us permission. That's okay. We've got the exact same thing here today, now. So those first two complaints, we have a modern day equivalent. In this case, let's say the federal government has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. Is there anything in the federal government where they will not allow us to pass a law unless we give up our authority over ourselves legislatively? Well, not exactly same, but the federal government hasn't forced the states to cede their sovereignty. They have blackmailed them instead. In other words, if you want to pass that law, that's fine, but your funding and everything, they start playing with government, with money. We have modern equivalents to this. They're not direct apples and apples here, though. This one here is going to be like an orange to a tangerine. And that's basically because in our system, it's still working well enough that they can't directly do this. They can't directly force you to give up your rights. They have to coerce you into it. It says he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the deposition of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with these measures. We don't have that problem as much today, but you have some of it, and this is the equivalent of Congress holding secret middle-of-the-night legislative sessions. That does happen. That's how we got the 16th and 17th Amendments. Yeah, in the middle of the night where you couldn't get a real quorum together, but you declared a quorum anyhow. Yeah, that has happened. So the federal government's done apples to apples here. He has dissolved Representative House repeatedly for opposing with many firmness his invasions of the rights of the people, blah, blah, blah. Okay. He's dissolved representative houses. Well, not technically. He hasn't done that. But we have had one party that'll just up and abandon its job and take off so that the House can't do its job. Now, that's at the state level. We've had a similar problem. So here again, we have oranges and tangerines. He has refused for a long time after such disillusions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remain in the meantime exposed. Oh yeah, we've got this. This is when Trump refused to put down Antifa, and this is when the state governors refused to put down Antifa. Both parties. Red and blue wing of this bird. Yeah, we've got apples to apples here today. And when it says he, we're talking about our governments at the state and federal level. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others, and encouraging. Okay, yes, this has actually happened. We've got apples to apples here. You cannot come from certain countries. We won't let you have that. But we'll allow open borders so that we get people from other countries. That's messing with the naturalization laws. I can't have white folk coming into this country, but we can have people of color from anywhere we want. Oh, Joe, that's racist talk. Yeah, I know. See what I mean? You chose manna over principle, and we've got race as a problem ever since. So that I'm not supposed to talk about the truth. Well, I got a little news flash for you, boys and girls. Fire's hot, water's wet. This right here, they've been messing with the immigration laws for a long time. I could be a white European male. Let's just say I'm a white European Christian heterosexual male, and I'm an engineer or a PhD. I want to immigrate. Nope, you can't come. But let's say that I'm from some other part of the world. I'm not white. I have no skills. I got a family of 12. We're going to be on welfare. Oh, come on in. That is exactly apples to apples to this complaint. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws establishing judicial powers. Yes, we've had this problem too. You've got laws. We've had attempts to fix problems in the judiciary. Nobody will allow that at the governor and federal level. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payments of their salaries. Yes and no, not quite. This is going to be maybe oranges to, not tangerines, but kumquat type comparison. Read the article. It's in there. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat up their substance. Oh, yes. That's the bureaucracy. That's Woodrow Wilson. That's an orange and an orange off the same branch of the same tree. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of the legislature. Yes. Now, today we're taught to love the military. USA, USA. But it's a standing army, and it is all over this country. Yeah, that's an apples to apples right there. It is effected to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. That is the military-industrial complex. Yes, we have an apple to apple there. Got the same complaint that they had back then. He has combined with others to subject us to jurisdictions foreign to our Constitution. Yes, we're tied to the UN now. And if we declare an emergency, the UN actually runs this country. We've already covered that in class. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is a legislative fact, and I showed it to you on the screen. We read it right out of their documents. So that's an orange and an orange off of the same twig on the same branch of the same tree. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, we've already got that one. We just covered it. That's an apples to apples. For protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any murder which they should commit on the inhabitants of the states. The FBI is an armed troop now. They can break into the Branch Davidians. They can shoot your son at the Ruby Ridge. They can do all, and yet they're not even tried. Yeah, apples to apples right there, folks. For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Oh, yeah. Yeah, apples to apples here, too. If we want to trade with this country, all they got to do is declare that country persona non grata, and you're not allowed to trade with them anymore. Or they'll put tax and tariffs, or you need a legislative approval for. No, we got apples to apples there. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. Oh, that happens all the time. Well, Joe, you elect them. No. We get taxes upon taxes upon taxes without our consent. No, we got apples to apples there. For depriving us of many cases the benefits of trial by jury. We've already got that. We've got people in jail right now for January 6th. Yeah, apples to apples. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. We've had them try to do this. Remember, they wanted to send Bush to The Hague to be tried. That was our own country doing that. Yeah, we got apples to apples here. For abolishing the free system of English laws in the neighboring provinces, establishing them in arbitrary government and enlarging its. Yes, we have that too. This happens when the state of Florida can't pass its own laws where the Constitution has no control over it. This is also happening when you put the UN or other foreign bodies. This is when a judge says, well, I don't care about what the Constitution says, but in Europe, the law says this, so I'm going to rule this way on a constitutional issue because the law. Yeah. We got apples to apples here. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. That's happening. The Constitution has been altered just by a judicial decree. That's the whole point of the progressive movement, was to alter the Constitution illegally. So yeah, we got apples to apples there. For suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invest with the powers to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. We don't, like I said, we don't have suspension of legislatures, but we do have one party that disrupts the legislature by taking off. And we do have them where they disrupt the legislatures by the federal government claiming power over state governments where the federal government doesn't have that power. So that's an apples to apples too. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Oh yes, that's the border. That right, that's an apples to apples. By refusing to defend the border, by refusing to stop Antifa from burning down our cities. Yeah, by refusing to keep criminals in jail and giving them free bail. Apples to apples in the state and federal level. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, and burned our towns and destroyed the lives of our people. The government supported Antifa. There's an apple to apple there. You just might have a red delicious to a granny apple, but you still got apple to apple. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death. Da, 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 da. He hasn't transported the armies here, but we have seen video of foreign people, foreign troops training on our land and tying us to the UN, which if they ever decide that we're in an insurrection, the UN can send its troops here. The federal government has made it legally, the facade of legality to bring foreign mercenaries here. And we have put foreigners into the military and gang members into our military to the extent that somewhere up to as many as estimates put it at between 10 and 25% of our military essentially are mercenaries. So we've got an oranges to tangerine here. Close enough. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive in the high seas to bear arms against their country. Now that one we don't have an apple to apple. Well, yeah, we do. If you're a police officer and you're being told that you have to enforce rules against this country that you know are unconstitutional, if you're in the military and you've been told to collect the weapons of the people like they did after Katrina, yeah, we got apples to apples here. He has used the military and law enforcement against our own people. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst. Oh yeah. That's every time they push for the Bubba effect. Apples to apples. In every stage of this oppression, we have petitioned for. Oh yeah, we keep asking Republicans, please save us from this. Oh no, we're not going to do that. Give us the White House, the Congress, and the Senate. We'll do it. Here you go. And then they turn around and they do all of these things too. So we've asked, we've begged at the state level, we beg at the county level, we beg it. No. Apples to apples. Nor have we wanting his attention to a brother. We have warned, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we've got all of this. Everything that the colonists were complaining about King George doing to them, we've got. Today, now, and then some. And that was written 7 years ago, off the cuff. If we were to really dig into it, you'll find more. I've shown you the book, None Dare Call It Treason. And in that book, they have a chapter where they list how the 49 planks of the Communist Manifesto have been interwoven into our governmental system. Every one of them would amount to a violation in the Declaration. So why don't we just reassert this Declaration as the states? All 50 states send 2 representatives each to a meeting. Call a convention. Don't even do an Article 5. You don't need to. Say, hey, we're all sending people. You blue states don't send anybody. We don't care about you. All red states, let's get together. See this document? Let's alter the complaints and resubmit it to the world. And then you don't even have to secede as an individual state. We're just going to secede as red states. Let's do it. I'm not kidding. Let's do it. Hey, DeSantis, call the red state governors up. Tell them send 2 delegates each that have their heads screwed on straight, preferably people that are not. Find some libertarians, DeSantis. Say we're all going to vote on this. All we want to do is change modernize the complaints. We'll leave everything else the same and take out the king and put in federal government. We'll vote on this. If all of us red states agree, we're just going to publish it. And we're a new nation. We're the United States of America. We'll kick the blue states out. It's legal, Governor. You know it. You're a JAG. You know you can do this. You know it's legal under international law, Governor. Get on it, Jack. Show this country you are not playing a part, that you're not part of this kabuki theater that's taking this nation apart. Don't play games. Don't be a super sophisticated Trump. Walk the walk, Governor DeSantis. Lead the way. Save what is left of this union. Fulfill the prophecy of the South rising again. I don't care how you want to look at it, Governor DeSantis. Lead the way. Blaze the trail. I'm not kidding. Do it. You don't need an Article 5, not when you're separating yourself from that government entirely. All you need is the states that want to unite with you. Post that thing after updating it, and you're done. Wise men have already written it for us. Founding fathers got it down right. Do it. If they won't, folks, the only option you and I have left is to county by county get people together and do that and secede from our state government, dissolve the state government. And even that's going to be a problem. Locally, we've got a gentleman here named Bernie Thompson who makes a living going around just exposing the corruption within our own local governments. And known. We've got in the city of Lynn Haven here in Bay County, we have a corrupt police chief knowingly supporting a corrupt mayor. And the federal government knows that they're corrupt. They framed the old mayor to get her out of office because she was going to be there for life. She did such a good job doing the people's work. The only way to get that mayor elected was to frame her. The local police chief helped. Bernie's exposed all of this. And we got people on trial for their life right now based over trumped up charges so that a crooked person could seize hold of the power of the government for their own personal. Where's Governor DeSantis on this? Governor DeSantis, you have the authority to come in here and remove all those people. Do it. You're too busy playing games. We're smacking down wokeness. We're smacking down critical race theory. We're smacking down all this stuff. Yeah, do the real job. Get rid of the corruption in government. This is why, Governor, I still think you're playing a kabuki theater. You're playing a long game to get yourself elected president, and then we'll find out you're just another stinking rhino. I mean, after all, you were a squid. I'm a Marine. Show me. Tell it to the Marines when we believe it. It might be true. At this point in time, you haven't convinced me, Governor. Your attack on Disney, that was politics. That was publicity press. Your attack on wokeness and the LGBT, all of that stuff is done to make you look good. You're out trumping Trump. Let me see you do something that actually has real bite. Come clean up the city of Lynn Haven. You have the authority. All you got to do is stroke a pen. They don't do it. And neither do you and I. Now, I have no authority to go clean up Lynn Haven. But if the citizens of the city of Lynn Haven were all to get together and go down to the police chief's office and the city council and just remove them. I mean, if you have to, don't use weapons, but just physically remove them. Pull them out of office. You're no longer there. You're gone. Say, well, that's not legal. Yes, it is. When the seat of government has become totally corrupt, if the people are still just, you can remove them. They have no authority over you. The criminal it's a principle of law. The criminal should not be allowed to benefit from their crime. So when these two coordinated, first of all, it's a RICO violation. But when they coordinate to seize the government and use it to their own personal gain and power, their own comfort, if the people are righteous and try to remove them because the governor won't, they're acting righteously. Remember what the Declaration just said? When the people who institute that government no longer want, there you go. That's the appeal back to natural law. Go do it. Now, if the local authorities pull out weapons, we have instances of how to handle this in the United States history. And that's what the Second Amendment was for. Because when the local government, at the city level, there's no other government. City level is the smallest you get. When they're thoroughly corrupt and they declare war on their people, the people of that city have a right to take things into their own hands because they're now at war with their own city government. And if the county government of that city won't do anything about it, and the state government, then they're at war with the county and the state as well. Is what it is, folks. This is definitions. This is all about definition. Form and function. Not just the little word you label on it, that you hang on it. The form and function. This is about liberty. This is about the rule of law. When you live under a corrupt government, you're not ruling under the rule of law. Now, if you want to bounce this right back into the pew, if you won't put down your posh, cushy little life, all you want to do is complain and wait for somebody else to do it, you're getting the government you deserve. Live with it. Scripture tells you, I'm going to send you a tyrant. He's in charge of the sword. He's going to rule over you because you've become so corrupt, you need somebody to rule over you. And Yahweh's going to use that tyrant to put you in your place. It's not that he's approving of the tyrant. This is Paul again. He's just going to use all things to work out for the good of those who believe. Doesn't say he's going to endorse all things. It says he's going to use them for the good of those who believe. So if a tyrant has to come in and establish some sort of tyrannical order, it's still order. So believers can still find a way to live within that order and stay under their radar. But if you're going to live in total anarchy, there's no protection whatsoever there. That's back to the rule of, law of nature, war, state of nature, everybody against everybody else. And what did the Declaration say? We institute governments to protect us from that. But that government is only legitimate so long as it stays within the bounds of that agreement and stays within the purpose of that agreement. Once it goes outside of it, it's no longer legitimate. But it's up to the people to fix it. People won't do that. Why? I've got too much to lose, Joe. What do you have to lose? My house and my job. Are they secure with a corrupt government? Well, yeah. No, they're not. ESG is going to take all of that from you. Well, then what'll I do? Well, then you'll become a serf, and you'll suffer for protecting everything you had to lose, rather than doing the job you should have been doing. You are worried about you, not your children, not your grandchildren, not your neighbor or your fellow man, not the perpetuation of this country or even the principles of the ideas of individual liberty, rule of law and governance. You are worried about you. So when you become a serf and you have nothing, and you're told if you're not happy, we're going to have to kill you, smile. Protect what you have. You're worried about your life. I think I know a book that says if you try to protect it, you're going to lose it. Founders understood that. Was it Nathan Hale? Only regret is that I have about one life to give for my country. And that's why George Bernard Shaw says, we got to get rid of that patriotism crap. Why? Well, that's because it makes you an enemy of mankind. No, it doesn't. It makes you an enemy of tyrants. So long as you're in a righteous country governed by righteous men and righteous laws. But if you're going to do away with patriotism, you're going to have to go communism, world government. That's a form of patriotism too. Communism, Marxists, that's extreme patriotism. They're just patriot to the Marxist ideal. So Bernard Shaw really meant we got to get rid of patriotism to individual nations, and all of you need to be patriotic to me, the world's dictator. That's what he really meant. He just couldn't put it that way. He couldn't give you this look. He had to give you the look. So now if you didn't see yesterday's show, it won't make any sense to you. If you did see yesterday's show, you'll be like, got it. But if you did see yesterday's show, how's it go? Mr. Obama has a very affable brow and it comes down to here. And a problem is he can't take it off because he's always looking like this. And you've seen those pictures of Obama with his nose in the air. That's the exact same stance that Mussolini used to stand in. So everything that Bernard Shaw said in that video yesterday about Mussolini would apply to Obama. I'm not picking on Obama per se. What I'm saying is I see the same spirit behind both men. Actually, I see that spirit behind George Bernard Shaw as well. And I see it behind the men who are trying and the women who are trying to take over this country. And you know what I see behind the masses of Americans? The same spirit. They're all just busy trying to rule their own part of the world. They're not ambitious enough to try to rule the country or the whole globe, but they're still trying to dictate how things happen in their little life. And that's why you have a corrupt country. Because you don't love thy neighbor with all thy heart as they'd love thyself. If you did, we'd have never gotten to this point. But we don't. So don't tell me that the Founding Fathers are wrong about religion. There's one religion that teaches that, to love your enemy, to love your neighbor. There's a one. No, Islam teaches that, Joe. No, it doesn't. Islam says love other Muslims that way. The Bible doesn't tell you to differentiate. See, there's one religion that teaches that. One. It happens to be the religion upon which this country was founded. The Judeo-Christian ethic. I know. I just got done reading a book by David Pawson and said, no, it didn't change the world. It was Greek thinking that changed the world. Got a little news flash for Mr. Pawson. As much as I love him, and I do, I still study him. He's one of my teachers. But this is a case of all of us can have little pieces of the puzzle wrong, especially me. But in this case, it doesn't matter whether you're a Greek thinker or a Hebrew thinker. Doesn't matter if you think in Hebrew terms or in pagan terms. You can still seek the one true creator of this universe. You just have to learn how to conceptualize in the way you think. Do I think like a Greek? Do I think like a Hebrew? I still have to learn to conceptualize him and his lessons in whatever way you were raised up thinking. It can be done. It can be done. You just got to work a little harder in certain cases because you have to learn to translate. But it can be done. And when Mr. Pawson says it can't be, and therefore the Christian church didn't change the world, that was all Greek thinking that changed the world, he's wrong. You know what ended the slaughter of the Christians and the gladiators and all the games and feeding the Christians to the lions? The Roman people got so tired of the blood that they used to revel in. They got tired of it, and they told Caesar and the Senate, stop. Too much. They used to put babies in the center square of the town to just let them die, infanticide. And the Christians would come and get them in the middle of the night and take care of the orphans. This is where the practice of putting the baby in that turnstile you see at the monasteries and turning, that's where that comes from, is that the believers would take care of the abandoned children. The believers would tend to the widows and to the sick in a community, whether they were other believers or not. They would just tend to everybody. It changed the hearts of the Roman people. It took time, but it did it. Mr. Pawson, I wish you were still alive. I'd talk to you about this. You're on the right track. You got to be careful with that Greek thinking in the Christian church. Yes, you're on the right track there. But it doesn't mean all of it was bad. And it doesn't mean the church didn't have as much of effect as it did. How does that connect to the Declaration of Independence? I've told you before, some of the criticisms from the left are justified. We need to address them. But you need to address them in accordance to natural law, not progressive law, because progressive law is man as his own God. Okay? Hopefully by now, if you're a member of the class, excuse me, if you've been a member of this class for a while, hopefully you're starting to see that now. I've shown you where the progressives call themselves gods. Hopefully you're starting to see this is not Joe's opinion. I'm not being overly insulting to progressives. I'm telling you that at the core, a progressive believes that they're God. They're the man of lawlessness. They're the person of 2 Thessalonians 2. No, Joe, I believe in the Bible. No, you cannot believe in the Bible and believe in a progressive ideal. They're mutually exclusive. One excludes the other. I'm sorry. That's just definition. Form and function. So you connect this back to the Declaration. Legitimate concerns. Hasatan, the accuser. He makes legitimate accusations against the believers. Just because we're diametrically opposed, Hasatan, Satan, the devil, is against Yahweh, the creator. But he does still make legitimate accusations against believers. Progressives make legitimate accusations against our system. But you don't use their solutions. You don't follow Satan's solutions. You go back to natural law, the revealed law. How do I fix that problem? Case in point, when Jefferson wrote against slavery, good complaint. The founding fathers solved it by punting it to the next generations, and they had to fight a civil war over it, and it still didn't get solved, and we're still fighting over that now. So yes, the left is right. That's part of the original sin of this country, but this country wasn't founded to protect slavery, and it wasn't founded on slavery. That's a lie. So you have a legitimate complaint mixed with lies. The only way to fix that is go back to the original ideal. Fix it according to natural law, We don't do that anymore. You're not going to be able to follow. Did you read Blackstone's commentary? You cannot follow natural law unless you're following the teachings of the scriptures. It's not possible. Doesn't work. According to Blackstone's own words. Let me bring that back up for you. Give me just a second. I'll get to it. We'll go over that again real fast. There he is. This is Blackstone. In William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, the pursuit of happiness is defined as the method by which man could know the law of nature as it applies to humans. So you got to know the law and act accordingly. Well, let's just jump forward to Blackstone's actual comments. When the Supreme Being formed the universe and created matter out of nothing, that tells us we're talking about Yahweh, the God of the Bible, the only God known to man that I'm aware of that creates out of nothing. He impressed certain principles upon the matter. In other words, it's innate to the matter. When he spoke it into existence, it's just part and parcel of this universe. When he put the matter into motion, he established certain laws of motion. There's Newton. Just like Wilson said, yeah, there's Newtonian ideas in here. Yep. But notice it's not just Newton that's in here. If we further advanced to vegetable and animal life, we shall find that they still govern by laws. That's evolution. The operations of inanimate organic processes are not left to chance. It's also just biological life. Or they would the creatures itself, but performed in a wondrous involuntary manner and guided by unerring rules laid down by the Creator. In other words, the universe is not alive. It's just working by the lawgiver's law. Man, considered as a creature, must necessarily be subject to the laws of his Creator, for he is an entirely dependent being. And consequently, as man depends absolutely upon his Maker for everything, it is necessary that he should in all points conform to his Maker's will. This will of his Maker is called the law of nature. So happiness is conforming to the Maker's will. The Maker's will is the law of nature. The doctrines thus delivered we called the revealed or divine law, the Bible, and they are to be found only in the Holy Scriptures, the Bible. These precepts are found upon comparison to be really a part of the original law of nature. In other words, if you obey Yahweh's commandments, everything seems to work because now you're working in accordance with the laws of this universe. As then the moral precepts of this law are indeed of the same original with those of the laws of nature, the revealed law. What he's telling you is that what we call the law of nature, everybody thinks that's just natural laws, physics and all that stuff. That's got nothing to do with the revealed law. He's telling you, no, they're part and parcel. They're one and the same. They're inseparable. So the Bible is part and parcel of natural law. Exactly what Romans 1 and 2 tells us. Is the law of nature expressly declared to be so by God himself? Yes, it is. Upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, depend all human laws. The laws of nature and the law of God. That's in the Declaration. Nature and nature's God. It come directly from Blackstone. Blackstone got it from St. Thomas Aquinas. Duh. If we're not going to operate that way, it ain't going to work. But the first thing we have to do is we got to get people to understand that this is the truth. This is our history. Remember, Orwell. Let's just go to Orwell, 1984. If I control the past, I control the present. And this is why you need to silence any and every voice that opposes your agenda. Because if you're woke and you want to rewrite the past so that you can control today and make everybody believe that everything is racist, then you got to shut people like Joe up. Because he might actually show you where to go find the printed material that proves everything is racist is a lie. And you see, here's the thing. If I'm teaching you the truth, you're going to be able to verify it for yourself. If I'm lying, you're going to find out I'm lying. So far, none of you have come back and told you that I've shown you anything on here that was a lie. I have heard from quite a few of you who have backstopped me and come back and said, oh, yeah, I found exactly what you said I'd find, and it says exactly what you said it would say. I've had a few of you that have done enough research that you came back to me and you said, yeah, you're right. You are keeping the scary parts to yourself. And they're correct. If you think I've scared you so far, I haven't shared what I know with you. I could make most of us on this channel just want to give up if you knew what I knew. that would not be edifying to share that with you. Doesn't do any good. So I teach you as best I can with what I know and try to tie it all together for you as best I can in a nice, neat, tight little bow. I help you see it as best I can. And like I was having a chat with Sharky just last night, I can't always get down to the level where everybody needs me to. I know too much. Certain things are like the air I breathe. I don't know how to explain them to people who need it explained. You must ask questions in the comment section or send emails so that I know who needs a simpler or more basic explanation of what. If you're still confused, you got to email me or comment or send a private message to one of your classmates here. They'll help. Because if you're going to be part of this class and you're not going to help, I'll get a hold of you at some time. Just like we've got people that you're not seeing in the comments section. They're being banned because they're part of Dodo Cop's world. By the way, we now have the attention of a dedicated bot on email. And we have more than one person calling us now. People with a bit of money because they're using some sophisticated programs that make it hard to trace them. The more they come after me, the more they tell me I'm on the right track. We all are. Because the enemy doesn't spend resources or time on somebody who's of no consequence. The point here for today, the Declaration of Independence, that's the beating heart of what this country was supposed to be, not the Constitution. Throw the Constitution out the window as long as you hold to the Declaration. And that's why the progressives had to divorce the two. They'll tell you there's no God in the Constitution. Well, that's not true, but they can't tell you about the Declaration of Independence. If they tell you that, that's easy to prove they're lying. Instead, what they tell you is the Declaration of Independence isn't law. It's not what the founders said. They said it is the supreme law. It's even over the Constitution because it appeals to the law of nature, and nature's God. So why do you divorce that? Because as soon as I get God out of the way, then all that's left is me. And now I get to be God. Hello, Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt and FDR. And like it or not, Donald Trump and Obama and George Bush and Bill Clinton. Pretty much everybody since it's maybe the founding era, which is exactly what the founding fathers told us to expect. That's another thing. We value genius in our country nowadays, our society. It's all about genius. Well, then why don't you listen to the largest collections of geniuses in one place and at one period of time and of one mind that mankind has ever known? The men who wrote that declaration, they primarily were the core of the men who wrote the Constitution, but the men who wrote the Declaration are superior to the Constitution. That is the largest group of selfless servant geniuses of which I'm aware in the history of mankind. And we ignore them. Yeah, we only value genius in this society if it's found in our own mirror. But cheer up. Tomorrow's the Sabbath. If you're still Sunday keeping Sabbath, I got it. Let's talk. Get back to the seventh day. You know, nature and nature's God. His rules, not man's. I did a Worship Wednesday on that for you. If you haven't read it and or seen it, watched it, go look it up. I cover that for you. I brought the scriptures. I brought the history of where the church says that they changed it to prove that they are superior over the Bible. Superior over the laws of God and God's nature. Nature and nature's God. Yeah. Man is his own God. Go home to mama. I'm quoting Red October, where the sonar guy says, his his program for hearing things. Whenever it gets confused, it runs home to mama because it was supposedly a geology program that when it didn't know what it was, it says it's magma. And he actually heard the new Russian sub. Well, in this case, it's just a metaphor for those of you who are movie geeks like me. But in this case, get home to God. Return to God. If my people who are called by my name will repent, turn back toward me. I mean, I'm only quoting John Adams or paraphrasing John Adams and Samuel Adams and a whole bunch of other founders. Maybe if it starts with you and you influence one or two people in your world and they influence one or two people in their world, we can repeat what the church did in the first century, the second and the third, and maybe we can save this country because we got a more solid foundation to start from right now than they did back then. But that's all up to you and the reflection in your mirror. Are you going to do it or not? And if you're not, quit complaining. Real bright, happy note to leave you on today, right? Sometimes a good preacher will do that to you. Because I know the best preacher that I'm aware of, he gave you one hellfire and brimstone for every happy, joy, gonna live in eternity with God preaching that he ever did. Balance. I love each and every one of y'all for being here. Y'all have a good day. Take care. Safe weekend. See you Monday. Manic Monday coming up. Take care. Bye.